I hate to do this to you, but in this video we're going to talk about the enabled functions by level. And what I mean by that is when I raise the domain to the Server 2003 functional level, what do I get for that? What's going to start working now? What new functionality has been added? Now, here's a little hint into some of my psychology on test taking. I never go into one of these tests thinking that I'm going to make 100 on it. So you may or may not agree with this. So you make your own decision here. But there are some things that to me are just not worth memorizing. And this may well be one of those. They might well ask you on the exam. They may show you a scenario of a functionality that you need. For example, the ability to rename a domain controller using the NetDom tool. That comes from raising it from Windows Server 2000 to the Server 2003 domain functional level. A lot of test prep stuff will tell you to memorize these things. Again, I would just read over these, be familiar with them. I don't know that I would spend the time memorizing this stuff. Nobody in the real world is going to memorize this. This is something you're going to look up in TechNet. I would just look over these, but if you want to shoot for that 100 or for a really high score, or if you're worried about other areas, memorize this stuff because they could very well ask you about this. So anyway, I would personally settle for a 97 as opposed to a 100 and miss a couple of these. Do it however you would like. So I want to go over this. You do need to be aware of what's happening, and you could probably just watch these videos. This is going to be part 1, and I'm sure there'll be a part 2 by the time I kind of get off track and chase some things here. At each level, when we go to Windows Server 2003 from 2000, we get the domain controller rename functionality using the NetDom tool. We also get the last logon timestamp attribute. Now what happens is that when a user or computer logs on to the domain, the logon time is added to that attribute. Now it's kind of hard to believe that in Windows Server 2000 in that domain they didn't do that, but they didn't, and they added that. The user password attribute. This allows the inet.org person object to share the same user password with the user object. Now just a little background here. The inet.org person is an object that was used to allow users to connect to and log on to non-Microsoft authentication systems, Kerberos type authentication systems. And so what you're seeing here are some things that administrators bumped into that Microsoft had to go back and add more functionality for, and obviously this is what's going on. Also at the 2003 domain level, you pick up default user and computer container redirection. In earlier versions, new accounts and computers automatically got dropped in this OU called users and computers, and then you had to move them. Well, you can now just redirect them by default. You don't have to go through all that stuff anymore. Authorization manager policies. Authorization policies based on applications can be stored in the Active Directory data store, domain services data store. There's a functionality that's in Windows Server that allows you to build authentication based on the application itself, and this is called role-based applications, all sorts of different terms out there for it. This lets you set up policies for that. Constrained delegation. Applications can access secure delegation of user credentials via the Kerberos authentication protocol, and again we're back to that application role stuff, and so we've picked up more functionality for that. Selective authentication. This one was pretty big. Now let me just kind of go a sidetrack right here just a second. There's another thing that I really can't find a place to put it in the course, so we'll talk about it here, and I will probably mention it another couple of times. When Windows 2000 Server first came out, I was actually consulting on that platform and did some work for a bank here in the Southeast with a friend of mine. And back at that time, Microsoft was recommending, they were so proud of Active Directory and the fact that you could have multiple domains and trees and forests, and so they were suggesting, like on a bank, that you had a domain for every branch. Then they started running into all kinds of problems with the administrators on changing things, moving them around, moving them from between domains and stuff. Now Microsoft, if you'll read their site, they'll actually say that now with an understanding of the real world application of Active Directory, blah blah blah, and I also have to agree with them here. I'm not knocking them by any chance here, but with the increase in networks, network connectivity is now pretty much guaranteed to be fast and to be always on and so forth. It has changed the way everything is set up a lot, and so they're now recommending for the most part, just do one domain as long as you can possibly get away with it. With selective authentication, one of the things that got added in 2003 was the ability to take a total different forest and create a trust relationship between them, because a lot of companies were buying other companies and so forth, and the DNS namespaces weren't even close. So anyway, selective authentication will allow you to do that. Now, in Windows Server 2008, when you jump up to the domain functional level of Server 2008, you pick up the DFSR of sysvol, which means sysvol replicates with the new DSFR instead of the old file replication services. Then there's Advanced Encryption Services, or AES. You've probably always seen this for authentication. This can be now increased to 128 and 256 bit, and this is actually replacing the old RC4 HMAC, or hash message authentication code encryption algorithm. I don't know about you, but if I ever have trouble sleeping, I get a book and start reading it about encryption. That's what Advanced Encryption Services gave us. Now what I'm going to do is stop this video right here. This will be the end of part 1. We will continue right here in part 2, so I'll look for you in that video.